Have you ever tried to solve a problem only to realize that your solution actually made it 10 times worse? That's the danger of what economists call perverse incentives. It's when you set up a reward system that accidentally encourages the very behavior that you're trying to stop. Proverbs 14:12 says there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end of it is the way to death. Today we're going to explore how perverse incentives wreak havoc in history, business, and family life, and how Christian leaders can avoid this trap of perverse incentives. And we probably should start by trying to answer the question, what is a perverse incentive? And an economist would tell you this: a perverse incentive is when a rule, a reward, or even a punishment unintentionally motivates the opposite behavior that you wanted. It's like telling your kids, if you brush your teeth, you'll get candy. So maybe you get them to brush their teeth, that's good, but you also rot their teeth even faster by giving them candy. The intentions are good, but the outcomes are destructive. Maybe you tell your sales force, hey, you'll get a bonus if you sell this many items, but you don't set a limit of what they have to sell it for. So they put things on an incredible sale and they sell tons of items, but you're losing money on every single item that they sell. There are several historical examples of perverse incentives. The most famous one is probably the Cobra Effect. This was India under British rule. In colonial India, British officials worried about deadly cobras in Delhi, India. Their solution, well, they were going to pay people for every dead cobra. If you turn in a dead cobra, you get paid a good amount of money. Seemed like a great idea, and at first it worked. The cobra numbers dropped significantly, but then people realized that they could breed cobras, they could kill them, and then they could cash in. The government realized what was happening. They finally discovered the scheme and that people were breeding cobras, and so they canceled the program. When they did that, breeders realized there was no more need to breed their cobras, and so they released their now worthless snakes into the wild. The result, there were far more cobras than ever before. This is a really good example of good intentions backfiring. Something really similar happened in French Hanoi, Vietnam. The rat tail bounty. French authorities once offered money for every rat tail that you would give. They hoped that they could eliminate the rat population because the rats were spreading disease in Vietnam. But instead of killing rats, many people cut off the tails and released the rats. That way, the rats could reproduce more tails to harvest later. The rat population exploded and people got paid for their rat tails. In our family, we've never really done an allowance for our kids. We want to teach our kids to work hard and not necessarily get an allowance. One time, my wife and I were listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and he was interviewing a friend of his, I believe, who lives in Hawaii and has a special kind of deer, I think, that he harvests, like natural deer and the special kind of venison, and seemed like a really sharp guy. And Tim Ferriss was really impressed with him and with his kids. And this guy talked about a system he had. He said that they never wanted to give an allowance for their kids, but they did something where at the beginning of the month, and I think for them, they put $31 bills on their refrigerator for each of their kids. Maybe he had 2 kids or something like that. And then if the kids disobeyed or they didn't take initiative or they did something wrong, their punishment is they would lose one of those dollars. So if they lost one a day, they'd get to the end of the month and not have anything left, or maybe if they were really good that month, they would have 25 of their $30 left. My wife and I thought it was a good idea. Hey, let's give that a try. And so we got a whole bunch of $1 bills because we have 5 kids. I think we started each month with $20 rather than $30. $20 instead of $30. And each kid had kind of their envelope and $20 bills up there, or sometimes, 4 sets of 5 or whatever. And at first it seemed to work great. The kids were really obeying, and it felt like there's certain things that you don't feel like you can give a punishment for, but they didn't take initiative. Okay, I can take $1 away. But after probably 3 or 4 months, it felt like the kids just kind of realized, like, hey, I can get away with not doing a chore or not doing my responsibility or doing something I normally wouldn't do because I'm okay with getting $15 at the end of the month. It's like they just took for granted that they were starting the month with the $20, and we felt like their behavior actually worsened. We had accidentally created a perverse incentive. Another historical example, much more modern, would be in the 2010s, the Wells Fargo scandal. This would be a modern business example, right? Wells Fargo employees were pressured with sales quotas to open new accounts. The incentive, you better hit your targets to open lots of new accounts or you could lose your job. And if you open a ton of new accounts, you'll get a big bonus. What was the unintended consequence of the perverse incentive? Thousands of fake accounts created without customer consent. Instead of serving customers, employees served the quota. They served themselves. And the bank lost billions of dollars in trust and in reputation, and I think was actually fined for that. A fourth example would be Roman soldiers and salt. In parts of the Roman Empire, soldiers were paid partly in salt. That's where we get our word actually salary. But when soldiers realized that their pay depended on how much salt was consumed, they sometimes manipulated records or hoarded supplies instead of protecting citizens. An incentive meant to ensure loyalty actually oftentimes undermined it. We see this in the Bible as well, right? There are several biblical parallels. You think about the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 23. They set up religious rules to enforce holiness, but their unintended effect was pride, hypocrisy, and burdens so heavy that Jesus said they shut people out of the kingdom of God. The Pharisees found a lot of loopholes, maybe like Congress seems to do today, find tax loopholes for themselves. That's what the Pharisees would do. They would say, oh, the Bible says the law says you can't walk a Sabbath day's journey, and they would set that, a certain number of steps. Can't go more than 500 steps on the Sabbath day. But if a Pharisee was invited to speak at a synagogue and it was thousands of steps away, I think they would do something like pick up several little pebbles from their house and say, well, this is part of my house. I can take 500 steps from my house, drop a little pebble. Oh, that's an extension of my house, kind of a house addition. So I can take another 500 steps. And that way they could go as far as they wanted. So they bound burdens on other people that they weren't willing to bear themselves. In Acts chapter 5, we see the story of a husband and wife, Ananias and Sapphira, and the early church was celebrating generosity. The unintended consequence here, Ananias and Sapphira tried to fake their giving. They said that they gave all their belongings to the church, everything they made from the sale of land, which was a lie. And so God judged them severely for that. What about 1 Samuel 14? You remember when Saul made a rash vow? Saul declared that no soldier should eat until evening as they pursued the Philistines. And the incentive, I think, was he meant well. He was trying to drive urgency, but it backfired. His soldiers grew faint, and his own son, Jonathan, nearly died because of Saul's rash vow that no one should eat until the evening. Why do we create perverse incentives? I think we mean well. No one sets out to try to hamstring their business. Probably, first of all, because of short-term thinking. I think we often crave quick results and we forget. Sometimes we don't think through the long-term effects. Probably a lot of times pride. We assume that we've thought through all the angles when we actually haven't. I know that's the case many times for me with my businesses. Thirdly, maybe a failure to understand human nature. People will almost always find loopholes, and people typically do what's in their best interest. Jeremiah 17:9 reminds us the heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked, or some translations say desperately sick. Who can understand it? When we forget the sinfulness of people, we create systems that almost inevitably invite corruption. What would be some application for Christian leaders? Well, if you're a pastor, if you measure success only by church attendance, you're probably setting up an unintentional incentive for entertainment over discipleship, that people in your church will just do anything to get people there. Numbers may go up while spiritual depth goes down. One time I remember hearing a pastor say there's one thing worse than an empty church, and that's an offended God. What about entrepreneurs? If you only reward sales, you may incentivize employees to exaggerate, to cut corners, to burn out, or to mark things down so much that you lose all of your profit margins. Rewarding integrity and service matters just as much as profit and sales. For parents, if you pay your kids to do chores, they may start refusing to help unless there's money involved. Gratitude and responsibility become transactional instead of relational. And what about if you're a business owner? I have the privilege of owning a number of businesses. If you only reward efficiency, you may discourage creativity or teamwork. Employees might hide mistakes instead of surfacing them. People might be too afraid to tell you when they mess up because they know that you incentivize only positivity, and so they're going to pretend that everything's positive even when it's not. So it's important for us in every area of life to design systems that reinforce godly values, things like honesty, stewardship, servant leadership, and genuine love. How can we avoid perverse incentives? Several practical things here. Number one, pray for wisdom. James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously, and it will be given him. God gives wisdom. Secondly, think in ripple effects. Don't just ask what's the immediate result, ask what behavior will this encourage for the long run. Thirdly, measure what matters. Don't just measure numbers, measure faithfulness, measure integrity, measure character. And fourthly, seek counsel. Proverbs 15:22, without counsel, plans fall. With many advisors, they succeed. My wife and I have several godly counselors who are a key part to our decision-making process. So in closing, leaders, be very careful what you incentivize, because what you reward, you will multiply. The world is full of Cobra Effect disasters, systems designed with good intentions that multiplied sin, greed, and ultimately destruction. But by God's grace, Christian leaders can design families, churches, and businesses that incentivize faithfulness, integrity, and love. That's ultimately what we want at the end of the day, isn't it? Remember, bad incentives breed bad fruit. Godly incentives grow eternal fruit. And I think especially as a parent, it's so important that we have our kids' hearts, that they're doing the right thing for the right reason, because you can train people just like you think about in the military. You can get outcomes and certain actions, but that doesn't mean that the person's heart is there. What kind of incentives are you building? Whether you're a pastor, a business owner, an entrepreneur, a parent, how are you doing with avoiding avoiding perverse incentives. I hope this short little video was helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks again, and I hope you have a super day.